Hello and welcome to That Means Nothing to Me. I'm your host, 𝕕𝕤𝕗, and actually today I have a bit of a disclaimer. This episode deals heavily with the process of embalming, cremation, and what happens to your body after you die. If you have a weak stomach or if you're uncomfortable with discussion about death, I would recommend skipping this episode. However, if you do decide to stick it out, I've put a little bell sound effect like this. Every time the conversation is about to go very downhill, I'd recommend skipping forward every time you hear it throughout the episode. That way you'll still get to hear Joe's incredibly unique story without some of the more gruesome details. Thanks so much and enjoy the show.
Hi, my name is Joe. I am a mortician by day. I was also a go-go dancer by night, and what I'm most proud of is going from working in the funeral home, burning the bodies in the daytime.
Yes, he did just say burning the bodies in the daytime.
And then going at night to go-go dancing and flirting and having people put money in my underwear band.
How did you get into being a mortician?
It was weird how I fell into being a mortician. It wasn't something that if you asked me 6 years ago, what do you see yourself doing, in the future, mortician probably wouldn't have been on the list at the time. How I got into it was I was really good with computers at the time, and I was kind of doing that freelance. I was also doing photography freelance. So I was doing computers on the side, kind of setting up networks for small businesses, things like that. And honestly, I was at the funeral home just supposed to be there for 1 month to set up their network, make sure these computers talk to these printers, and so on and so forth, Well, it was during that month that I had there where the man who was the crematory operator just up and left one day. He gave no 2 weeks notice, just decided he didn't want to be there anymore. And the owner of the business came in and said that he had quit that morning and they were looking for somebody to run the crematory. And gosh darn it, wouldn't you know, I was the only one who raised my hand.
I have known Joe for all of 8 minutes at this point in the interview, and yet I'm not surprised by this.
And then I just kind of went from there, got back in school, and eventually went to school for mortuary law, and that's where I am now. I'm still cremating and sewing mouths shut and making bodies look good. So.
Oh my gosh. I feel like that's such a misunderstood profession. There's so little that people know about it because the only time it's represented is in horror movies.
It really is. It really is a misunderstood profession to a certain extent. When I was dating, just after I had started doing that, and I would tell people that's what I did. First of all, that raised a minefield of questions. I've had I had somebody tell me that they were scared because of my profession. It frightened them. It was kind of an eye-opener for me because I didn't think about that. I didn't think about somebody else thinking about my profession as being, they're just sitting there all night thinking, oh, he could hide the body and nobody would ever even know. But it's one of those things where you tell people and they say, how do you do that for a living? And my answer is always the same. I didn't kill anybody. I'm just disposing of the body after they died. So it's definitely been interesting when I get into conversations.
That's so interesting. I can't imagine another profession that people feel like they would just carry it over to their home life for fun. If you were a tailor, you wouldn't go on a date with somebody and you'd be like, oh my gosh, he's going to resize my pants while I'm asleep. He's going to sew my mouth shut and burn me alive. That's not...
Right. I know, exactly. It's And the sewing the mouth shut, just to clarify, we do that all from the inside so it doesn't show. Yeah, up through a suture needle goes right up through the inside of the upper lip, if you can picture this. It goes through the inside of the upper lip, out through the nostril, then through the septum into the other nostril, down through the inside of the lip again, and then one suture through the inside of the lower part of your mouth, like along the lower gum line. And then the string, you just tie it together and the mouth stays shut, and they're perfect for viewing, really. Yeah, so that's one of my favorite. I think that's one of my favorite ones to start off with telling people about is the sewing the mouth shut.
Oh, totally. Because it's so foreign. It's such a weird concept to think about.
It really is, and then I can kind of gauge the person I'm talking to a little bit. You know, and I've seen all sorts of reactions to that. Everything from the reaction of where the face just tells you the story of, please, I don't want to know anymore. Didn't even want to know this much, and then I see the reaction of, and this is the more common one, startled, but at the same time very intrigued. So a body is burned at about 1,650 degrees, couple hours, about an hour per 100 pounds. So it's a little different than your standard Thanksgiving turkey. But you do have to kind of like stoke, and when the body's on fire, you have to go back and check on it, make sure everything's running smoothly enough. And when I started the job, I really couldn't do it, but I'm so used to it now that it's come second nature at this point. And gosh, how do I say it? I almost have a routine now, you know, going in there, pulling the body, introducing myself. Hello, Mrs. Smith, I am your crematory operator today.
You talk to them?
They're wonderful. They don't talk back. I don't know if you knew, but my very first job was I worked in customer service for 9 years. And so going from that to setting people on fire is actually kind of a relief. You know, after 9 years of customer service, the idea of setting people on fire is a very comforting thought. And so now I go in there with a smile, and you know, that same public's attitude, just that carried over in those 9 years, carried over into my funeral work. And hello, Mrs. Smith, I'm your crematory operator today. I hear this is your first time being cremated. Don't worry, we're going to make this as fast and painless as possible. Please keep your hands, feet, arms, and legs inside the retort at all times. There is no eating, drinking, or flash photography. Notice I didn't say anything about smoking, because in a couple minutes you're going to be smoking. We thank you for choosing our funeral home. Pushes in, turns on music. She's just a girl and she's on fire.
Oh my God.
You know, that is my day now. How can you not enjoy that?
How long did it take you to just be comfortable with the whole process?
It probably took me about half a year, probably about a solid 6 months to be completely comfortable. And there are some things that I'm not entirely comfortable with yet. And there's just going to be some things that I'm not going to be. Children. That is the worst. You know, most of the time in my profession, I see people who passed away 80, 90 years old, hospice care, cancer, all these years of cancer, and, you know, or, you know, 100 years old, lived in their house until they were like 98, and then they had to go into a nursing home. I see that, and it's just like, you know, those people passed away, but those were celebrations of life. I can't, you know, I don't have, granted, I don't know the person, but even still, I don't have much of a bad feeling there, because, you know, that person lived a good long life. They had a lot that they did in their lives, and I look at the memorial, you know, the pictures they send in for the memorial videos, and it's like they went to Egypt, they went to Paris, they went here or there, they traveled, they did what they died after a wonderful long life. And then I see kids, and it's just complete opposite end of the spectrum. I see people, anyone that's younger than me, I have a problem with. It's just, you know, that shouldn't happen. I feel like that's you know, that's not the order of things. You know, you shouldn't pass away at a young age. One thing that's, I think, always going to bother me, every time I see it, there's never going to be a time that I see a kid in my funeral home and I'm going to say, well, this, you know, they lived a good life, you know. So that's something I don't think I'm ever going to used to, and I think I'm okay with not getting used to that.
Does the cause of death change how you interact with people who come to your table?
There is. There was one case that I had and this was a very tragic case. It happened, oh gosh, I want to say it was probably about 2 years ago, around 2 years ago now. The situation was this guy had, I guess it was a total hostage situation. It had himself and I think it was like 3 kids that were locked into an apartment or a house, somewhere in Orlando. And he was like holding these kids hostage. It didn't end well at all. The kids he murdered all the kids, and then he committed suicide. He shot himself. And they had a really tough time, finding a funeral home for this guy, because a lot of funeral homes didn't want to take him because of the situation, because he was a kid killer, and then he offed himself. And my boss came to me, and I remember the whole conversation. He didn't want to take this guy in either, almost and I understand it. I understand not wanting to take this guy in, but at the end of the day, we have to do what's right for the family. And that's really what I try to keep in mind more than anything else. Yeah, I talk to the dead bodies, but when it all comes down to it, we're really helping the family out. The dead person is not there, and it is the family that we're helping, and that's what I told my boss too. And I know he understood that, but sometimes we need to be reminded that we're helping the family out, and think of the family being in that situation. They don't want to be dealing with this right now. They don't want to be sitting in the funeral home making these arrangements. They didn't want to be turned down by other funeral homes in Orlando. The best we can do is help them out with the services that they need done. Of course, I will say this: a lot of times we give discounts, and I straight up told him, no, you charge them full price, but either way, we have to help them out, and because bottom line is, someone is going to have to dispose of the body, and someone is going to have to get paid from it, whether it's being forced by the county at that point or not. It's going to have to happen. So that situation was one where we got him in, and it was in the back of my head that I'm just like, I really just, the whole kid killer thing, I didn't want to. I had conniptions about it myself. I didn't really want to have him there either, but I had to put that aside to say that we have to help. It's the family that we're helping, and that's the bottom line. It's the family that we're helping out here. So I guess the circumstances of death like that, yeah, that's something that I think about. And believe me, I was way happier pushing that guy into the fire.
I'm really impressed with your kind of morbid humor. I don't know how else you would be able to talk about some of this stuff.
That's just it. And this is, seriously, this is me being as candid as possible, Trey. I got to tell you, because it's not a conversation that I just go around having with everyone. I do, when people ask, I talk about it. It's not something that I don't talk about or don't like talking about. Honestly, I freaking love talking about it. But when it comes to talking about it, we have to have a dark sense of humor a little bit, and I think everyone in our profession does, because we have to do it to get through. I'm not going to say specifics on this one, but there is a medical examiner's office in the state of Florida that I went into once to bring a body into our care. And when I went there and I saw the coolers that they had for the bodies, they have a sign hanging off their door that said, "Beware of zombies." So, it's everyone in our profession. I think we have to have kind of a morbid sense of humor in order to get through the day sometimes, because what are we dealing with? We're dealing with families that are grieving, sad people everywhere. If we don't have a dark sense of humor, something that we can laugh at, or something where we can make ourselves laugh in some way to get through it, then, we would just be depressed all the time. Because, working there, I think about death a lot. it's unavoidable when you're working in it. You think about your family members, and planning for yourself in case what happens if I pass away. What if I go before my mother goes? I want to make sure that all my stuff is in order. Granted, I'm young, but I could walk out and get hit by an airplane. Who knows? So I need to make sure my stuff is in order, and it's something that I don't think I would think about unless I was in this profession. It puts a new perspective on things. But we have to, that's why we have to laugh about it, though, because these are things that are always constantly on our minds. If we're on call, we're getting death calls like anytime, day or night, and to bring loved ones into our care. The family's already calling, they're grieving. It's very sad on the business end. So I think we look for that little bit of relief in our personal lives, because we are thinking about death even then, and we need that relief, that kind of break away from it.
I'm begging you to skip this. I had to hear it, but you don't. This is your last warning.
Do you know what a trocar is, Trey?
I do not.
Okay, so it's probably one of the most barbaric things I've ever seen in my life. But so a trocar, this is something that I can. So when a body is embalmed, after the embalming part is done, a trocar is like this big device that they use to stick into like the trunk of a person to suck out all like excess fluids. So if anyone had any fluids in their lungs, or any excess fluids because you don't want a body purging, during a service. So you have to do what you can to avoid that. Honestly, I think the whole embalming process is very graphic.
What do you mean suck out? It's like a vacuum?
Yeah, it's like a big stick that has like an open end on it's like you stick it into a person, and it has like a hose attached to it, and it sucks like all excess fluids out of the body of a person. It's pretty nasty. But yeah, it's like a vacuum kind of hose, and it vacuums everything out into a drain.
A drain?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
All excess fluids, everything inside. It's nasty. It's gnarly stuff.
At one point in our interview, I asked Joe if there was anything that had happened to him that felt like it was straight out of a horror movie. And to my surprise, he answered,
Yes, that guy that sat up on me, and this was fun because I actually did this removal. I went to the house, and brought the guy into our care, drove him to the funeral home myself, put him in the box, put him in the cooler. Family came in later that day to make arrangements with the funeral director, right? While they make arrangements, they decide that they want to do something we call an ID view. Basically, they want to see his body. There's not going to be any embalming. It's usually just 2 to 3 people that see him, but they just want to see that we have his body, and that they might want to just say goodbye. So that's just an extra service that we do offer. The funeral director was in the arrangement room meeting with the family. He came back and told me that we were going to do an ID view after the arrangements were made. So I had to go out to the cooler and get this guy ready for his ID viewing with the family, which is basic preparation, like what we talked about earlier with the sewing the mouth shut, making sure the eyes stay closed, things like that. It's very basic preparation that goes into an ID view. So there's no embalming or anything. And I go to pull him from the cooler, and he's like peeking over the side of the box at me. Like his face is lifted against it's against the lid, and he's looking over at me. He's dead. He's very much dead. But he's staring at me, and it's
God.
I'm not gonna lie, it startled me a little bit. His muscles contracted just enough. It happens a little, it happened, and I've seen this happen once or twice, but it's a slow contraction. And that's what happened when we put him in the cooler, though, I guess. His muscles slowly contracted in an upwards motion to make it look like he was kind of sitting up at kind of a 45-degree angle.
Oh.
Yeah. So it startled me. Like, I got the rack out of the cooler, and then I saw him there, and I was just like, oh, gosh.
Ugh.
Yeah, it was, but we got it done. It was a thing that we were able to do, and, you know, the family was very, very appreciative, very grateful, and he looked normal by the time we were ready for the viewing. There are a lot of things that happen that families don't see, and they would never know about, and they don't ever know about, because we get it taken care of before the viewing is taking place.
What kind of precautions are there, if there are any, to prevent you from going to work one day and you walk in the back and a parent or a friend is laying there on the table?
When we get the first call that comes in saying, hey, this person has passed and this family has selected your funeral home, I would see their name. Like, gotcha. I would see who it is. And it happens if it's someone that maybe I wasn't really close with but knew, and I've had that happen before. Like, I would walk in and see a name that I'm like, oh, I think I know this person. I think it's someone that I've casually, interacted with. It was someone that I recognize the name, and I used to see them out at a bar, if they happen to frequent the same bar that I did. And then I'd say, okay, so that was, and that I would make it known that, yeah, I do know that person. And it's not a big deal. There's nothing that says that I can't, that we can't know the person that we're helping out. We can help our own friends, family. In fact, I would prefer if any of my friends or family did pass away that they came to my facility, because at least at my facility, I know they're being taken care of well. It's one of those things where it's like, I know that because I'd rather be able to keep an eye on them myself, because I know that I know what's going on here. I know that in my facility, they're safe.
I'm going to let this music play a little bit if you need a breather or just kind of a little unwind from that previous part of the interview. We'll be back with part 2 here in a second. I couldn't exactly figure out why I was having so much trouble coming up with questions to ask Joe about go-go dancing. And then...
Have you ever been to a bar with go-go dancers, Trey?
I have not. I have not.
That's why.
Buckle in. You are not ready for the second half of this interview. How did you first get into go-go dancing?
Oh gosh, go-go dancing was my salvation when I moved to Orlando. And that was the time when I was just working at Publix for the most part. Well, it was my salvation when I moved to Orlando. I actually started it in Lakeland at a bar that was not there for very long called Club Karma. So I worked there at night to make a little bit extra money because at the time I was young and in college, didn't have a hell of a lot of money, and was still trying to move out of mom's house. So, when you get a little desperate and you're trying to move out of mom's house, you're like, and there's a bar right in town that needs go-go dancers, you're like, maybe I could do this and it'll help me move me out a little faster. And it did help me move out a little faster. I didn't expect to like it, but I did. I did like it. I enjoyed it. And it was great exercise because I got to dance for 4 hours a night, and I could eat whatever I wanted. And so I did that at night for a while I was doing Publix in the daytime. And that's how I eventually saved up some money to get an apartment in Orlando, and I moved out of mom's house. So that's really how it started. It was kind of a thing that I didn't expect to be in as long as I did. I met a dancer in Orlando when I was working in Lakeland. He was the one that actually got me set up at a place here in Orlando where I was making, of course, Orlando, bigger city, so I was making better money. where I worked was it was a bar that was known for having like twinkish looking go-go boys.
I realize this may be a stupid question. What is a go-go dancer?
You're right. I need to describe that for the people that have never seen go-go dancers. I say box. Okay, so let me explain. Where we used to dance, there were 3 boxes, 3 like 2 foot by 2 foot by 2 foot, I'm estimating, boxes that would be in the main bar where I worked. And there was a dancer that would, like, they're just like, 2 cubic feet boxes. And the dancers would step on these boxes and we'd dance in basically our shoes and underwear. For the entertainment of the patrons of the bar. So you're in your underwear in a room full of all these people, and now not only are you in your underwear in a room full of these people, but you're on top of a 2 foot box dancing, and you got to dance for them. It feels weird at first. The first time you do it, it feels very strange, very foreign. After a couple times, you get used to it. And at first, and you have to get a level of confidence there that it feels almost impossible to get. It feels like it's almost impossible to get hold of. Because, I mean, the first time I did it, I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be comfortable enough doing this. And then I got up there and I started dancing, and people actually started giving me money. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's how this works. I could do this for money. All right, that's fine. And then the hips move a little bit more freely and not so tense anymore. And, eventually it just becomes second nature. And you get regular customers too. And for being a go-go dancer, I loved my regular customers. If I came in and I saw my regulars in there, I'm like, oh, good, I'm going to make some money tonight.
How did all of these jobs work at the same time?
I was go-go dancing at night, and I was a mortician in the daytime, and I was doing Publix on weekends. So it was really, really weird to have all these like different hats to wear. And then when, like, if there were some people that would come in at nighttime and they knew what I did in the daytime, and they would just want to talk to me about that. I don't know why. It's that part is not my business, but it's like, they had questions, and it's I guess it's just one of those things that it's like it interested them to the point where they kind of didn't want to ask, but at the same time it was like a train wreck. They couldn't turn away from it. It's like I don't want to know, but I have so many questions.
The thing that interested me most about this interview was that one minute Joe was completely alone. The only living thing in a small, sterile, well-lit room with only a corpse to talk to. And the next, half naked, dancing on a pedestal, crammed into a loud and pulsating bar with dollar bills poking out of his underwear. I wanted to know firsthand what having, quite literally, the least related jobs on the planet was like. How was that, like, mentally, to go to flip-flop between them and, like, be so surrounded by death at one point and then be so surrounded by life another?
And I'm gonna tell you straight up, that is exactly why the dark sense of humor comes in at where it does. Because that, like, if I didn't have a dark sense of humor, it would probably be a lot more draining than it already is. And it has been draining. Like, there were things that, there's things that I see there that are very emotionally draining things. But to go from that to that environment in the daytime, to a more high energy, more dancey atmosphere at night.
You could even say alive.
It was. I think the dancing was pretty refreshing. Because don't get me wrong, I love both of those jobs. Like, a mortician, like I hope I'm doing this for the next 30 years, and I hope I retire doing it. But go-go dancing as well, I love doing it. And you know what? If I hadn't quit and gained 20 pounds, I would have still been back up on that box. I loved that. I could eat whatever I wanted, and I didn't gain an ounce, and then I quit. And of course, then I packed the pounds on. But it was different. And I think in a way, having both there when I was starting to get into the mortician thing, having the dancing there is kind of like a something on the opposite end of the spectrum, kind of balanced out my mental health a little bit. Because at first, getting into the funeral home, it was more draining at first than that the first 6 months or so. I think that first bit of time was the most draining emotionally. So I was fortunate to have a different job where I could go from that kind of low to a very happy, kind of high, uplifting environment. Now it's different because I actually do have weekends off now. This is the first time in my life that first time in my working life that I've only worked one job since probably about 2009, 2010, somewhere around there. So now it's like I have weekends off. So my weekends are my happy time where I kind of take my weekends and recoup. I get some stuff around the house done. I go to like a nightclub or a bar or go to one of the local theme parks, or just something that's not work related, something to get my mind out of that mindset. And so when I didn't have weekends off, when I was working every single day of the week, that was go-go dancing was my relief. It was, in a way, that was my happy job. And that's probably why I've worked so many jobs. It's not because there was times that I had to, but there were times that I worked multiple jobs because I wanted to. I wanted one job that's, serious job, fun job. I got one that's a serious job that I do 5 days a week, and then I have another one that's a fun job, still making money, but I'm actually having a good time doing that.
Did your time as a mortician change the way you saw people, even when they were alive?
Oh, definitely. Even now, when I meet people, I think straight off the bat, how long they would take to cremate. I know that's weird, but it's I'll meet someone in my head. I'm looking, and I'm just about 2-3 hours, 2.5 hours. God. I would say, that's the first thing that pops up. Is just it's that, and the idea that everyone that I meet and everyone that you meet, you have to think about, they have a ticking time clock above their head. That means that they're not going to be around anymore. Only thing is, you can't see that clock, but it is ticking. You don't know what time that's going to happen, but it's going to happen. So that's another thing that I think about. It's I've got a clock over my head right now. I don't know when it's going to stop. But that's a thought that I am constantly having, and it's one of those things that it's if I'm sitting alone at home when the power goes out, I think about it, or if I'm at a bar having a drink with a friend, it comes into my head. It's just one of those things that's always there. It's always in the back of my mind, The thing about being a mortician that has impacted me the most is a constant it's a constant reminder of mortality. And that constant reminder of mortality has it's made me care so much less about so many things that are just so trivial when you actually think about them. It made me more carefree, really. Being a mortician made me more carefree in the idea that I'm okay with being a go-go dancer. I'm okay with doing doing things that maybe years prior I would have thought, okay, if I do that, I can probably never run for office. Um, I feel like I wanted to do it. I wanted to try it. And in that way, being a mortician has impacted me more than anything else. But being a go-go dancer is just, I realized after becoming a mortician that I might as well just do it while I'm young and have the looks for it. Because there's going to be a time when I'm not, and you can't go back. You can't rewind. I think what I'm most proud of is I'm most proud of how I've learned how to be versatile in my professional life, and how it's actually taught me a lot about my personal life as well. I've had an array of jobs like that, from being a mortician to a go-go dancer, like those both being on the extreme ends, but I'm proud that that's taught me to just kind of experience everything. And that's really the lesson that I've learned overall, is just to experience everything that you can, whether it be like being a go dancer or being a mortician. It's good to have a perspective of each with whichever hat you wear. It's good to have a different perspective on things, and it gives you a different perspective on life overall. And both jobs have taught me to not take life or myself so seriously. We can't take life seriously, because none of us are ever going to make it out alive. Might as well just live it up.
I think the best part of that was your slightly unhinged laughter.
Are you saying I'm unhinged?
No, I'm just saying that it's a good.
I'm not unhinged.
it's absolutely perfect.
Okay, I can see that.
This has got to be one of my favorite interviews I've ever done. This is incredible. Thank you so much.
I've had a great time. This has been an awesome interview. I love this. It's been the 2 hours flew by. It really did.
Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
It was a pleasure. I've had a pleasure. This has been awesome. Thank you.
Multiple times through our interview, it struck me just how much Joe loved and missed go-go dancing. At the time of this recording, the last time he had been up on the box was in 2018, 2 years ago. I'm very excited to announce that Joe will be returning to the box. He's been asked for, by popular demand, to dance at a club called Savoy here in Orlando. He said, "It felt like coming home." That Means Nothing to Me is a podcast hosted by me, 𝕔𝕙𝐴𝐿𝐴. Audio editing is done on Audacity Suite 2.3.0 and were recorded on a Yeti Blackout omnidirectional mic. All of our music credits for this episode can be found in the show notes, wherever it is you are listening to this. Special thanks go to Joe Dodd and all of you listening at home. Another reminder, I mentioned it in the previous episode, but our Patreon is up and running, so if you want to support the show even with $1 a month, you can head over there and do just that. There's a couple of cool rewards I came up with built in with the different amounts, so read through each one and see if there's something in it that applies to you. And a big thank you to our most recent Patreon supporter, 𝐒𝐴lejandro_Santiago, who took money out of his barbecue ribs fund in order to help me make this episode. We're still working on the formatting, length, and overall vibe of the show, so if you have any questions, comments, or you just want to let us know what you thought, please feel free to shoot me a message at contact@thatmeansnothing.com. We can also be found on all social media at @thatmeans0, the number 0. Thanks for listening.